The sun rose red over 4, painting the sky in colors that reminded of blood. He had seen enough blood in his 14 years to know the comparison was not a kind one. But beauty on this planet always came with danger. That was the first lesson every child learned here. Stood at the edge of the colony's outer fence, his eyes scanning the tree line. The trees were not really trees. They were giant fungal growths that reached toward the sky like twisted fingers. They made sounds at night, creaking and groaning as they released spores into the air. The sounds had scared him when he was younger. Now they were just part of life. He carried a spear over his shoulder. He had made it himself from scrap metal and a wooden shaft. The blade was sharp enough to cut through hide. He had tested it many times. On his hip hung an old pulse pistol that his father had left behind. The weapon barely worked anymore. It might fire 3 shots on a good day, but 3 shots were better than none. Behind him, the colony was waking up. He could hear the sounds of people starting their day, machines humming, doors opening and closing, children laughing somewhere in the distance. There were about 2,000 people living here. They had come from Earth 60 years ago looking for a new home. What they found was 4, a planet that wanted to kill them every single day. Finished his morning check of the fence. No breaks, no claw marks, no signs that anything had tried to get through during the night. He marked his observations in a small notebook and headed back toward his home. The house was small, just 3 rooms built from local stone and metal sheets. Smoke rose from the chimney. That meant was awake and cooking breakfast. Walked inside and found exactly what he expected. Stood by the stove, stirring something in a pot. The old man was 63 years old, with white hair and deep lines on his face. He had been a soldier once, back on Earth. Now he was just a farmer trying to survive like everyone else. "Fence is secure," said. Nodded without turning around. "Good, sit down, food is almost ready." Sat at the wooden table. A moment later, a small figure appeared from the back room, rubbed her eyes as she walked toward them. She was 10 years old, with long black hair that she never bothered to brush properly. Made a mental note to remind her later. "Good morning," said, yawning. "Morning," replied. "Did you sleep well?" Shrugged. She had nightmares sometimes. They both did, but they did not talk about that. Brought bowls of hot grain porridge to the table. It was the same thing they ate every morning. Food on 4 was limited. You ate what you could grow or catch. Variety was a luxury nobody could afford. They ate in comfortable silence. This was their routine: wake up, check the fence, eat breakfast, then work until the sun went down. Every day was the same, and that sameness kept them alive. After breakfast, took outside to teach her about plants. This was important knowledge. Some plants on 4 could feed you. Others could kill you in minutes. The difference between them was sometimes just a slightly different color or shape of leaf. "What about this one?" asked, pointing at a small bush with blue berries. Looked at it carefully. "Safe to eat, but only the berries. The leaves will make you sick." Good, felt a small spark of pride. Was learning fast. She was smart, smarter than him probably, but smart did not mean much if you could not survive. They spent the morning gathering herbs and checking traps. Had set several small traps for the rabbit-like creatures that lived in the fungal forest. Today they had caught 2. It was enough meat for several days. As they walked back toward the colony, noticed movement in the sky. He stopped and looked up. For a moment he thought he saw something, a flash of light maybe, a reflection of some kind, but then it was gone. "What is it?" asked. "Nothing," said, "just a bird." But there were no birds on 4. He knew that. He filed the observation away in his mind and kept walking. Far above the planet, hidden behind a cloak of advanced technology, a massive ship floated in silence. The ship belonged to a species that had traveled among the stars for longer than humans had existed. They were watchers, observers. They studied other species the way humans studied insects. Lord stood on the observation deck, his 4 eyes fixed on the planet below. He was old even by standards. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species destroy themselves and others reach for greatness. Humans, he had decided long ago, were neither interesting nor important. "Status report," he said, his voice deep and calm. Elder stepped forward. He was the ship's chief scholar, responsible for documenting everything they observed. "The human colony continues to survive. Population remains stable at approximately 2,000. No significant technological advancement detected." "As expected," said. "They struggle against this world like all primitive species do. Continue standard observation." Nearby, Lady listened to the conversation. She was daughter, young and curious in ways that made her father uncomfortable. She spent too much time watching the humans, he thought. She found them interesting when they were clearly not. "Father," said, "permission to speak." Nodded. "The humans have survived on this planet for 60 years. The mortality rate for new colonies in hostile environments is usually much higher. Does that not suggest something worth noting?" Considered her words. "It suggests they are stubborn. Stubbornness is not wisdom, it is not strength, it is simply a refusal to accept reality." He turned away from the viewing window. "Continue observation, document what you must, but do not expect to find anything remarkable." Said nothing. She simply returned her attention to the planet below. Her eyes found the small settlement on the surface. And somewhere in that settlement, a young human boy was walking home with his sister, completely unaware that he was being watched. Did not know that his life was being recorded. He did not know that beings from across the galaxy had already decided he was unimportant. He only knew that he had food for the week, his sister was safe, and the fence was secure. For now, that was enough. But the universe was about to show him that survival required more than routine. It required something that the head never truly understood. It required a human heart. 3 days passed without trouble. The weather stayed calm. The fence stayed secure. Life continued in its quiet, predictable rhythm. Allowed himself to relax just a little. That was his mistake. It was early afternoon when asked permission to gather herbs near the eastern ridge. She had done this task many times before. The area was close to the colony, within sight of the watchtowers. It should have been safe. "Stay where I can see you," told her, "and take your whistle. If anything happens, blow it as loud as you can." Rolled her eyes the way only a younger sister could. "I know, you tell me every time. And I will keep telling you until you are old and gray." She laughed at that and ran off with her basket. Watched her go, then returned to his work repairing a section of fence. The metal had rusted through, and he needed to replace it before nightfall. An hour passed, then 2, looked up from his work and scanned the eastern ridge. He could not see, his heart began to beat faster. "Stay calm," he told himself. "She probably moved behind a rock or a tree. She is fine." He put down his tools and walked toward the ridge. The grass here was tall, reaching up to his waist. It swayed in the wind like waves on an ocean, pushed through it, calling his sister's name. "Time to come back." No answer. He called again, louder this time, still nothing. Then he saw it, her basket lying on the ground. Herbs were scattered around it as if dropped in a hurry, and next to the basket, carved deep into the bark of a nearby tree, were claw marks. 5 long gouges, each one as thick as his finger. His blood went cold. He knew those marks. Every colonist knew those marks. They belonged to one of the most dangerous predators on 4. The creatures were massive, with 6 legs and jaws that could crush bone like paper. They did not hunt for food alone. They took prey back to their dens, sometimes keeping victims alive for days. Forced himself to breathe. He knelt down and examined the ground. The grass was flattened in a path leading toward the valley. He could see where the creature had dragged something. Someone. He stood up and started running. Back at the house, was fixing the roof when he heard shouting. The old man climbed down as fast as his aging body would allow. By the time his feet touched the ground, was already there, grabbing his spear and pistol. "Is gone," said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Took her. Trail goes into the valley." His face went pale. "Wait, we need to gather people. We need weapons, a proper group." "That will take hours. She might not have hours." "You cannot fight alone. You are a boy. This is suicide." Stopped and looked at the old man. There was no anger in his eyes, no fear, just cold, hard certainty. "She is my sister," he said. "I am going." Opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. He had seen that look before, long ago, in the eyes of soldiers who had already made peace with death. There was no talking to someone with that look. "I will get help," finally said. "We will follow as fast as we can, just stay alive until we get there." Nodded once, then turned and ran toward the valley. High above the planet, Lady noticed the sudden movement on her monitoring screen. She had been watching the colony out of habit, not expecting to see anything interesting. But now, a single heat signature was moving rapidly away from the settlement, heading into the wilderness. "Curious," she said softly. She adjusted her instruments and zoomed in. The figure was the young human male she had observed before, the one who checked the fence every morning. He was running at full speed, carrying primitive weapons, heading toward a location that her sensors had marked as extremely dangerous. "Elder," she called, "you should see this." The old scholar walked over and looked at her screen. "What am I seeing?" "The small human is pursuing something. I am trying to determine what." She ran a quick analysis of the area. The results made her pause. "There is a predator den ahead of him," she said. "Multiple life forms, large ones, and one small heat signature that does not match the others." "Another human," said, understanding. "Yes, a juvenile female, the one he was with earlier." Studied the data. The predators in that region are classified as lethal to all known humanoid species. The male human is small, poorly armed, and alone. He will die if he continues. "Yes," agreed, "he must know that." "Then why does he continue?" Did not answer. She did not have an answer. She requested permission from her father to observe the situation more closely. Lord granted it with a wave of his hand. Another primitive creature about to die, he assumed. It happened constantly across the galaxy. This was nothing special, but felt something different. She watched the small figure on her screen running through the fungal forest, jumping over fallen logs, crossing streams without slowing down. He showed no hesitation, no doubt. He simply ran toward almost certain death as if it were the only possible choice. "Why?" she whispered to herself. "You must know you cannot win, so why?" The human could not hear her question. He was too far away in every sense. But the answer existed in his heart, in a place that had never learned to look. It was simple, really. Was afraid, was alone, needed him. That was all the reason needed. The forest grew darker as he went deeper into the valley. The fungal trees blocked out the sun, leaving only shadows and the sound of his own footsteps. He could see the trail clearly now, broken branches and disturbed soil. That was not trying to hide its path. Why would it? Nothing on this planet was foolish enough to follow it. Nothing except a human boy who had already lost his parents and would die before losing his sister too. Ran until his lungs burned, then he kept running. Behind him, the colony was organizing a rescue party. Ahead of him, monsters waited in the darkness. And above him, alien eyes watched with growing interest. The universe was paying attention now. It just did not know why yet. The valley was a place where colonists did not go. Old maps marked it simply as Forbidden Zone in red letters. The story said that hunting parties had entered the valley years ago. They never came back. Now it was simply accepted that the valley belonged to and humans stayed away. did not care about maps or stories. He only cared about the trail beneath his feet and the sister at the end of it. The ground sloped downward as he went deeper. The air grew colder. The fungal trees here were older, their trunks covered in strange, glowing moss that gave off a weak blue light. It would have been beautiful if had time to notice. He did not. He had been running for almost an hour when he reached the river. It was not a large river, maybe 20 meters across, but the water moved fast, fed by melting ice from the mountains. White foam churned over rocks. The cold coming off it was intense, biting at his skin even from the bank. The trail led straight across. Did not hesitate, he waded into the water. The cold hit him like a physical blow. His muscles seized up. His breath caught in his throat. The current pulled at his legs, trying to knock him down. He pushed forward anyway, one step at a time, holding his spear above his head to keep it dry. Halfway across, his foot slipped on a rock. He went under. The world became darkness and ice. Water filled his nose, his mouth. The current spun him around, and for a moment he did not know which way was up. Panic clawed at the edges of his mind. Then he felt his feet touch bottom. He pushed hard and broke the surface, gasping for air. His hands found a rock, and he pulled himself forward until he reached the other side. He collapsed on the bank, coughing and shaking. His body temperature had dropped dangerously. He could feel his fingers going numb. A voice in his head told him to stop, to rest, to build a fire before hypothermia killed him. He ignored the voice and stood up. The trail continued ahead. He followed it. On the observation ship, Lady watched with growing amazement. Her instruments tracked the human's vital signs. His core temperature had dropped to a level that should have caused most species to collapse. His heart rate was elevated to the point of danger. Multiple indicators suggested he should be unconscious or dead. But he kept moving. "This is not possible," she said. Elder stood beside her, his own eyes fixed on the data. "And yet it is happening. The human body is not designed to endure this. By all biological metrics, he should have stopped." "Why has he not?" Shook his head slowly. "I do not know. This is beyond my understanding." Captain joined them, his military mind analyzing the situation differently. "It is adrenaline, a chemical response to stress. It will wear off soon and then he will collapse." "Perhaps," said, "but he has not collapsed yet." They watched in silence as the small figure continued through the forest. Did not know how long he walked after the river. Time lost meaning in the darkness of the valley. His wet clothes clung to his body like ice. His teeth chattered so hard he thought they might crack, but he kept putting one foot in front of the other. The trail led to a cliff face. At the base of the cliff was an opening, a cave mouth as dark as a hole in the universe. The marks on the rocks around it left no doubt about what lived inside. This was the den. Stopped and listened. From inside the cave came sounds, low growling, heavy breathing, and underneath it all, barely audible, a small sound that made his heart clench. Crying was alive. He moved toward the cave entrance, staying low, keeping his footsteps silent. The smell hit him first, a thick animal scent mixed with something worse. Rotting meat, old bones. They did not clean their den. Why would they? Nothing dared to challenge them here. The cave opened into a larger chamber. Weak light filtered in through cracks in the ceiling, just enough to see. And what saw made his stomach turn. 3. The creatures were even larger than the stories said. Their bodies were covered in dark fur, matted with old blood. 6 legs each, thick as tree trunks. Heads like wolves but bigger, with jaws that could swallow a man's arm whole. Black eyes that reflected the dim light. One of them was sleeping near the entrance. The other 2 were further back, fighting over something that did not want to identify. And in the corner, pressed against the stone wall, was. She was alive but frozen with terror. Her eyes were wide, her body shaking. She had curled herself into the smallest ball possible, trying to disappear. she had not seen yet. Her gaze was fixed on the monsters just meters away from her. Gripped his spear, his broken pistol hung at his hip, a reminder of how little he truly had. 3 shots if he was lucky, 1 if he was incredibly lucky, 3 was impossible. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to retreat, to wait for help, to make a plan. But was crying, and had made a promise to his dying mother that he would always protect her. He stepped into the den. On the ship above, the entire observation deck had gone silent. Even Lord had stopped what he was doing to watch. The screens showed every detail. The 3 predators, the small human girl, and the even smaller human male walking into certain death. "He enters anyway," whispered. Captain shook his head. "Suicide behavior. It is common in primitive species. Parents protecting offspring will sometimes sacrifice themselves without logic." "But she is not his offspring," Elder said quietly. "Our records show they are siblings. He has no biological imperative to die for her. Natural selection does not reward this behavior." "Then why?" demanded. No one answered. They had studied thousands of species across the galaxy. They had observed wars and extinctions and acts of incredible cruelty, but they had never seen this. A child walking into a monster's den for another child. Not because he had to. Because he chose to. "Whatever happens next," Lord said slowly, "record everything. I want to understand this." In the cave below moved like a shadow. The sleeping did not wake. The other 2 were still distracted. He was 10 meters from, then 5, then 2. Her eyes found him. He saw recognition flood her face, followed immediately by fresh terror. She opened her mouth to speak, pressed a finger to his lips. And then the largest turned its head and saw him. The creature's eyes locked onto. For a single heartbeat, nothing moved. The cave was perfectly still, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then the roared. The sound was deafening. It echoed off the cave walls and shook bones. The other 2 creatures woke instantly, their heads snapping toward the intruder, screamed. The largest beast lowered its head and charged. Pulled his pistol and fired. The shot hit the creature's shoulder, burning through fur and muscle. It howled in pain but did not slow down. Fired again. Another hit, this time to the chest. Still it came. He pulled the trigger a 3rd time. Nothing happened. The pistol was dead. He threw it aside and raised his spear. It was almost on him now, its jaws open wide enough to swallow his entire head. Could see every tooth, yellow and stained with old blood. He could smell its breath, hot and rotten. He could feel death approaching. He did not run. He planted his feet firmly on the stone floor. He adjusted his grip on the spear, and when the beast lunged for him, he stepped forward instead of back. The spear drove into his throat. Put every bit of strength he had into that thrust. The blade punched through fur and muscle, through tissue and vein. Hot blood sprayed across his face. The creature's momentum carried it forward and felt himself lifted off his feet. He hit the cave wall hard. Something in his chest cracked. Pain exploded through his body, white and blinding. He fell to the ground, gasping for air that would not come. Above him, the staggered. It tried to roar again, but only blood came out. It took 1 step, then another, and then collapsed. Dead. Lay on the ground, trying to breathe. Every breath was agony. Broken ribs, he thought distantly. Maybe 2, maybe more. It did not matter. The other were still alive, and they were moving toward him now. He forced himself to stand. The pain nearly made him black out. His vision swam. His legs felt like water. But he got to his feet and turned to face the remaining creatures. They were circling him now, their black eyes studying this strange, small thing that had killed one of their own. They were not charging. Not yet. They were waiting, trying to understand the threat. Positioned himself between the end. His spear had broken in the first creature's body. He bent down, never taking his eyes off the predators, and picked up the broken shaft. In his other hand, he grabbed a rock from the ground. A broken stick, a rock, against two monsters that could tear him apart in seconds. He held his ground. Whispered behind him. Her voice was tiny, terrified. "Please. Stay behind me," he said. His voice was calm. He did not feel calm, but needed him to be calm, so he was. "Do not move." The larger of the two growled low in its throat. It took a step forward, did not flinch. He stared directly into its eyes, the rock raised, ready to throw. "Come on then," he said quietly. "I am right here." The creature took another step, stood perfectly still. On the observation ship, nobody spoke. Every screen showed the same image: a small human boy, bloody and broken, standing against two predators that outweighed him by hundreds of kilograms. He should have been running. He should have been begging. He should have been doing anything except what he was doing. But he just stood there. "What is he doing?" Captain asked. For the first time, his voice held something other than dismissal. It might have been confusion. It might have been something deeper. "He is challenging them," Elder said slowly. "He is telling them that if they want the female, they must go through him first. That is insane. He cannot win." "No," Lady agreed. "He cannot, he must know that, and yet he challenges them anyway." They watched as the seconds stretched into minutes. The two continued to circle, continued to growl, continued to test the strange creature before them. And the human boy continued to stand there, broken spear in one hand, rock in the other, refusing to move. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3. His arms were shaking now, not from fear but from exhaustion and blood loss. The wound in his side was worse than he had thought. He could feel warmth spreading down his leg, but he did not lower his arms. He did not step back. Was behind him. That was all that mattered. 4 minutes 5. The smaller made a sudden move, darting forward, threw the rock with all his strength. It struck the creature's nose with a crack. The beast yelped and retreated, shaking its head. Picked up another rock. His movements were slower now. His vision was getting dark around the edges. "Still here," he said to the creatures. "Still right here." 6 minutes. And then something changed. The larger stopped circling. It looked at for a long moment, those black eyes unreadable. Then it made a sound, a low rumble that was not quite a growl. The smaller one responded with the same sound. And then they backed away. 1 step, 2, 3. They retreated toward the deeper part of the cave, never turning their backs on the human boy but moving away nonetheless. They vanished into the darkness, leaving only the echo of their movement behind. Stood alone in the dim light, surrounded by silence. He had won. His legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, the broken spear falling from his fingers. The pain was everywhere now, a roaring fire consuming his body, but through it all he heard a voice. Small arms wrapped around him. Was there, crying, holding him as if she could keep him alive through sheer force of will. "I found you," he whispered. "I found you." "You came for me," she sobbed. "You actually came." "Always, I will always come for you." He wanted to say more, but the darkness was pulling at him now. He could feel consciousness slipping away like water through his fingers. "We need to go," he managed. "Can you walk?" Nodded through her tears. "Then help me up, we are going home." She pulled at his arm, and somehow he got to his feet. Leaning on his little sister, each step sending waves of agony through his broken body, began the long walk out of the valley. On the ship above, the silence continued. Lord stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. Elder was furiously making notes, his hands moving faster than they had in centuries. Captain looked like someone had struck him across the face. Only Lady found words. "He did not defeat them with strength," she said quietly. "He is weaker than them, smaller, slower. He should have died in the first second." "Then how?" demanded. "How did he survive?" watched the two small figures on the screen moving slowly through the fungal forest. The boy could barely walk. His vital signs suggested he should be unconscious. And yet he kept moving, kept pushing forward because his sister needed him too. He did not show fear, she said finally. He showed them that he would die before he moved, and they did not know how to respond to that. Predators respect strength, said thoughtfully, but perhaps they also recognize something else, something they cannot define, something that makes a creature dangerous even when it should not be. What do you call such a thing? Asked. Thought for a moment. The humans have many words for it, she said. Courage, will, heart. She paused. Love. Lord said nothing, but he did not look away from the screen. And somewhere far below, a boy carried his sister home, did not remember most of the journey back. The world had become a blur of pain and shadow, punctuated by moments of clarity that faded as quickly as they came. He remembered its voice, constant and steady, telling him to keep moving. He remembered the cold of the river as they crossed it again, somehow finding a shallower path. He remembered the fungal trees giving way to grassland, and grassland giving way to familiar fences. Then there were other voices, shouting, running footsteps. The rescue party had found them. Reached them first. The old man's face was a mask of terror and relief, tears cutting through the dust on his cheeks. He grabbed and pulled her into his arms, checking her for wounds, asking questions she could not answer. He saved me, was all she could say. Saved me. Other hands reached for. He felt himself being lifted, carried. Someone was pressing cloth against the wound in his side. Someone else was saying his name over and over, as if the sound could keep him alive. He looked up at the sky one last time before consciousness left him. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of red and gold. Somewhere up there, hidden behind the light, something was watching him. He smiled. Then the darkness took him. He woke 3 days later in the colony's medical center. The ceiling above him was white and clean, so different from the stone of the cave that for a moment he thought he was dreaming. Then the pain returned, a dull ache that covered his entire body, and he knew he was alive. Was sitting beside his bed. She had not moved from that spot since he had been brought in, the nurses told him later. She had refused to eat, refused to sleep, until she knew her brother would survive. When his eyes opened, she started crying again. You are stupid, she said through her tears. You are the person on this whole planet. Probably, he agreed. His voice was weak, barely a whisper. But you are safe. You almost died. Almost, not actually. She hit his arm gently, and then hugged him as carefully as she could manage without hurting his wounds. Outside the medical center, the colony was celebrating. Word had spread quickly. A 14-year-old boy had tracked it to its den, killed one, faced down 2 more, and walked out with his sister alive. It was the kind of story that people needed on a world like 4, a story of hope, a story of what humans could do when they had no choice but to do the impossible. Came to see him that evening. The old man sat beside his bed in silence for a long time, looking at the boy he had raised for the past 3 years. Finally, he spoke. When I was a soldier, said, I served with men who had earned medals and honors from wars across 3-star systems. I thought I knew what courage looked like. He paused. I was wrong. Did not know what to say, so he said nothing. What you did should not have been possible, continued. By every measure you should have died in that cave, but you did not, and I have been trying to understand why. I did not think about it, admitted. I just knew I had to get her back. Nodded slowly. Yes, I think that is exactly right. You did not think, you simply acted, and maybe that is what makes humans different from everything else in this universe. High above the planet, a similar conversation was taking place. Lord had called an emergency council of all senior officers. The observation deck was filled with, their 4 eyes fixed on the screens that showed footage from the cave. The recording had been played 3 times already. Each time, the result was the same: silence and confusion. "The evidence is clear," Elder said, addressing the assembly. The human male designation entered a predator den containing 3 apex hunters. He was armed with 1 malfunctioning projectile weapon and 1 primitive melee tool. His physical capabilities were vastly inferior to the threats he faced. By all logical assessment, his probability of survival was less than 1%. "And yet he survived," Captain said flatly. "And yet he survived," confirmed. "More than that, he succeeded in his objective. He retrieved the juvenile female and escaped. 1 predator was killed, 2 more retreated without engaging." "The predators feared him," Lady said. "That is what the footage shows. Despite every advantage they held, they feared him." "Why?" demanded one of the senior commanders. "What could make an apex predator fear a creature it could destroy without effort?" Stood and faced the assembly. She had spent the past 3 days studying the footage, analyzing every second, searching for answers. "I believe I understand," she said. "But the explanation will require us to reconsider everything we think we know about sentient species." She activated a new display, showing vital signs from the confrontation. "Look at these readings," she said. "Heart rate elevated to dangerous levels, core temperature dropping from hypothermia, blood loss from multiple wounds. By every biological standard, this organism should have collapsed, but he remained standing. He remained defiant." "Adrenaline," suggested, "a chemical response." "Yes, but adrenaline alone does not explain this," pointed to another set of data. "The predators are instinct-driven creatures. They assess threats based on simple criteria: size, strength, aggression, willingness to fight. A prey animal that runs triggers pursuit. A rival that fights can be defeated. But this human did something they could not process." "He refused to move," Elder said, understanding dawning in his voice. "Exactly. He did not run. He did not truly fight. He simply stood between them and their prey, bleeding and broken, and refused to yield. He communicated, through body language alone, that killing him would cost them more than he was worth. He made himself more trouble than his meat would be." "That is ridiculous," the commander said. "The predators could have killed him in seconds." "Yes," agreed. "But he did not act like he believed that. He acted like victory was possible. He projected something that the predators could not understand, something that made them hesitate." "What?" Lady paused before answering. "The humans call it will, the refusal to accept defeat even when defeat is certain. The decision to fight not because you can win, but because surrender is simply not an option. It is not logical. It does not improve survival odds in most cases. And yet," she looked at the frozen image of standing in the cave with his broken spear. "And yet here we are." Lord had been silent throughout the discussion. Now he spoke, and everyone fell quiet. "I have lived for 6,000 years," he said. "I have watched species rise and fall across the galaxy. I have seen civilizations burn themselves to ash and others reach heights of glory. In all that time, I have learned one thing." He stood and walked to the main screen, looking at the image of the young human. "The universe does not care about logic. It does not reward the strongest or the most prepared. It rewards those who refuse to give up, those who keep fighting when there is no reason to fight, those who love something more than they fear death." He turned to face his officers. "We classified humans as Category 3, primitive, unremarkable, barely worth monitoring." He paused. "We were wrong." "What do you suggest, my lord?" Captain asked. "Upgrade their classification to priority observation. Full documentation of all human activity in this sector. I want to understand this species. I want to know what else they are capable of." Lady stepped forward. "Father, I request permission to conduct closer observation, surface level if necessary." Looked at his daughter for a long moment, then he nodded. "Granted, but maintain distance. Do not interfere, not yet. And if they detect us, almost smiled, then we will learn how they respond to that as well. The council was dismissed. The return to their stations, their views of humanity forever changed by a single human boy. And far below, lay in his hospital bed, unaware that he had just altered the course of galactic history. He was thinking about what to cook for dinner once he recovered. Like noodles, he would make noodles. 4 weeks passed, healed slowly but steadily. The colony's doctor was amazed at his recovery. The broken ribs were mending. The deep wound in his side was closing. Soon he would be strong enough to return to his normal routine. The colony treated him differently now. People nodded to him on the streets. Older men who had never spoken to him before now stopped to shake his hand. Children pointed and whispered when he walked by. He was a hero, they said, a legend in the making. Hated it. He had not done anything special, he insisted. He had just done what anyone would do, what any brother would do. The praise felt wrong, like wearing clothes that did not fit. He wanted things to go back to the way they were, simple, quiet, normal. But normal was no longer possible. The nightmares started for 2 days after they returned. She would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, seeing in every shadow. The doctors said it was trauma, that it would fade with time. Was not sure he believed them. Every night when the screaming started, he went to her room. He sat beside her bed and held her hand. He told her stories, the same ones their mother used to tell them. Stories about Earth, about oceans and forests and animals that were not trying to kill you. Stories about a world that existed only in memory now. Sometimes the stories helped. Sometimes they did not. Either way, stayed until fell asleep again. Then he returned to his own bed and lay awake until morning. He never complained. He never showed frustration. Needed him, and that was enough. Lady watched all of this. She had come to the surface 3 days after the council meeting, piloting a small shuttle equipped with cloaking technology far beyond human detection. She landed in the hills overlooking the colony and set up an observation post that rendered her invisible to any human sensor. For weeks she watched. She watched check the fence every morning just as he had done before. She watched him hunt and gather and repair damaged equipment. She watched him refuse praise with embarrassed silence. She watched him sit with his sister through every nightmare. The more she watched, the less she understood. Fascinating, she said to herself one evening, recording her observations. The human male shows no signs of lasting psychological damage from his experience. He has returned to his normal patterns of behavior with minimal disruption. This suggests either remarkable mental resilience or an inability to process trauma. She watched walk across the colony square, heading home from a day of work. And yet he wakes frequently during the night. He shows signs of fatigue that suggest disturbed sleep. He is suffering, but he hides it from others. Why? What purpose does concealing weakness serve in a community-based species? She watched him enter his home. A moment later, light appeared in the window. Smoke rose from the chimney. He is preparing food. Analysis of his behavior patterns suggests he prioritizes the female's nutrition over his own. He eats less so she can eat more. This is consistent with the protective behavior observed in the cave, but extends beyond immediate threat response. She paused her recording, thinking. I do not understand, she admitted finally. My training tells me that resources should be distributed based on utility. The male is larger, stronger, more capable of providing for the family unit. Logic dictates he should receive more food to maintain his effectiveness, but he gives more to the female, who is smaller and contributes less to their survival. She watched as shadows moved behind the window, and sitting down to eat together. Unless the calculation is not about utility, unless there is something else driving his behavior, something I have not learned to measure. Days turned into weeks. continued her observation, expanding her focus to include other humans in the colony. She watched parents caring for sick children. She watched young people helping elderly ones with heavy loads. She watched a woman give her last portion of food to a stranger who had none. None of it made sense by standards. They had built their civilization on logic and efficiency. Resources went where they were most useful. Weakness was acknowledged and accommodated but not prioritized. The strong protected the weak because the weak had value, not because protecting them felt right. But humans seemed to operate by different rules entirely. One night witnessed something that changed her understanding forever. It was late, most of the colony was asleep, but was having another nightmare worse than usual. Her screams echoed across the settlement. Sensors picked up the sound clearly. Rushed to her room. He held her as she sobbed, whispering words of comfort that could not quite hear. But what happened next, she saw perfectly. Said something through her tears, enhanced the audio and listened. "Why do you stay with me?" the girl asked. "I am broken. I cannot stop being scared. I make things harder for you. Why do you not leave?" Pulled back and looked at his sister. In the dim light, his face was gentle, patient, filled with something that had no word for. He said, "Do you remember what Mom used to say about family?" The girl nodded weakly. "Family means nobody gets left behind. Not when things are easy, not when things are hard, not ever." He wiped tears from her face. "You are not broken. You are hurting. There is a difference, and hurting heals. I know because I am healing too. You do not seem hurt. That is because I have you to take care of. Taking care of you helps me forget my own pain." He smiled. "So really, you are helping me just by being here." Sniffled, "Really?" "Really, now go back to sleep. I will stay until you do." She closed her eyes, and he held her hand, and within minutes she was breathing softly, peacefully. Watched sit there in the darkness, his sister's hand in his. He did not move. He did not check his communicator or look out the window or do anything except be present. His entire existence in that moment was focused on making sure one small girl felt safe. Deactivated her recording equipment. She sat in silence for a long time, processing what she had seen. Then she opened a private communication channel to the observation ship. "Father," she said when Lord appeared on her screen, "I need to speak with you. I believe I have made an error in my analysis of humanity." "What kind of error?" Looked back at the small house where now sat alone, watching over his sleeping sister. "I have been studying them as if they were like us," she said, "trying to find logical patterns in their behavior, trying to calculate the benefits of their choices. But they are not like us. They do not make decisions based on benefit." "Then what drives them?" Thought carefully before answering. "Connection," she said finally. "They form bonds with each other that override logic, override self-interest, override even survival instinct. They will sacrifice everything, give everything, suffer everything for the ones they love, not because it is wise, because they cannot imagine doing otherwise." Is that not weakness? A species driven by emotion rather than reason seems doomed to self-destruction. "I thought so too," admitted. "But now I am not certain. Consider, a species that will die for each other will also kill for each other, fight for each other, endure anything for each other. When you threaten what they love, they do not calculate odds. They do not consider retreat." She remembered in the cave, broken and bleeding, refusing to move. "They just stand there," she said, "and they do not give up until they win or they die." Lord was silent for a long moment. "You believe this makes them dangerous?" "I believe this makes them unprecedented. Every species we have ever studied operates on some version of self-interest. Survival of the individual, the family unit, the tribe, the species. But humans extend their concept of self to include others in ways we do not fully comprehend." "What do you recommend?" Took a breath. "I recommend we watch them more closely. Learn everything we can, because if we ever come into conflict with this species—" She paused. "I would rather not discover what they are capable of when they have something to protect." Lord nodded slowly. "Continue your observation. Report anything significant." The channel closed, returned her attention to the colony below. Inside his house, finally stood. He tucked the blanket around his sister and walked to the window. For a moment, he looked up at the night sky, at the stars scattered across the darkness. He could not have known that one of those lights was not a star. He could not have known he was being watched. But something in his expression suggested he might have suspected. He smiled just slightly and closed the curtains. The winter came early that year. Temperatures dropped far below normal. The fungal forests went dormant, their bioluminescent glow fading to nothing. Snow fell for the first time in the colony's history, covering everything in a blanket of white that would have been beautiful if it were not so deadly. The cold drove the wildlife down from the mountains. Creatures that normally stayed far from human settlements now wandered closer, desperate for food. The colony's sensors detected increased predator activity every night. People stopped going outside alone after dark. Knew something bad was coming. He could feel it in his bones, the way said old soldiers could feel approaching danger. He reinforced the fence around their house. He checked his weapons. He taught how to hide in the cellar and stay quiet. The attack came on the coldest night of the season. Not one, not three. 11. They came from the northern ridge, a hunting pack driven together by starvation. The colony's alarm system screamed warnings into the frozen air. People grabbed whatever weapons they had and ran to defensive positions. But they were farmers and builders, not soldiers. They had never faced anything like this. The first breach happened at the eastern fence. 3 tore through the metal like paper and entered the settlement. Screams followed. Gunfire. The wet sound of tearing flesh. Was there in minutes. His ribs still ached from the old injury, but he ignored the pain. He had his spear, a new one made of proper steel this time, and a working pulse rifle that had given him. He moved through the chaos like a ghost, pulling wounded colonists to safety, directing others to fall back to stronger positions. They watched from above. The observation ship had dropped lower in orbit, close enough to see details clearly. The entire crew was monitoring the situation. Lord stood at the center of the deck, his face unreadable. "Multiple casualties," Elder reported. "The humans are not equipped to handle this threat. At current rates, the colony will suffer critical losses within the hour." "The predators will eventually retreat," Captain said. "They always do." "Not before significant deaths," Lady countered. She had returned to the ship when the attack began. Her voice was tight with something the other did not recognize. "Father, we have to do something." "Our protocols forbid interference with primitive species," said. "You know this. These people are going to die." "People die. It is the nature of the universe." On the surface below had reached the main square. The fighting was concentrated here. Colonists had formed a defensive circle, but it was failing. 2 more had broken through, and a 3rd was circling for position. Saw near the medical tent. She was helping the wounded, passing bandages and supplies, her face pale but determined. Was approaching from her blind side. He did not think, he just moved. His rifle fired 3 times. 2 shots hit the creature's legs. The 3rd hit its skull. It stumbled and crashed into a supply cart, twitching but not dead, dropped the rifle and drew his spear. "Get back," he shouted at the people behind him. "Get everyone inside." The wounded rose to its feet. It was angry now, focused entirely on the small human who had hurt it. It charged. Met it head-on. The battle was brutal. The creature's claws raked across his shoulder, drawing blood. He drove his spear into its side. It twisted, throwing him to the ground. He rolled away from its jaws, grabbed a fallen piece of metal and stabbed upward into its throat. The beast collapsed, but there were more coming. Stood in the center of the square, bleeding from a dozen wounds, facing 3 more alone. The colonists behind him were running, carrying the injured, trying to reach the safety of the reinforced buildings. They needed time. So gave them time. He planted his feet, he raised his weapon, and he waited. On the observation deck, Lady turned to her father. "He is doing it again," she said. "He is standing between the predators and his people. He knows he will die. He is doing it anyway." "The same behavior as before," noted. "Remarkable consistency." "Father, please," his voice cracked. "He showed me something I never expected to see in any species. I do not want to watch him die." Lord looked at his daughter. In 6,000 years he had never seen her like this, moved, changed, affected by something so small and far away. He looked back at the screen. The human boy stood alone, surrounded by monsters, refusing to run. "This is not logical," he said quietly. "He gains nothing from this." "No," agreed, "but he does it anyway. That is what makes them special." Was silent for a long moment. They were closing in. The boy would be dead in seconds. Then Lord made a decision. "Weapons officer, target the predators, precision strikes only, no collateral damage." The bridge went silent with shock. "My lord asked." "You heard me, fire." The ship's weapons activated. Beams of light shot down from the sky, striking each with perfect accuracy. One by one the creatures fell. 11 beams, 11 kills. In seconds the attack was over. The colonists stared at the sky in stunned disbelief. The clouds had parted, revealing something impossible. A ship, an alien ship, vast and gleaming, hovering above their world. Lowered his weapon and looked up. His heart was pounding, his wounds were screaming, but all he could feel was wonder. A shuttle detached from the main ship and descended toward the colony. It landed in the square, its engines humming with power beyond human understanding. A door opened, and someone stepped out. Lady walked toward the humans. She wore no weapons. Her posture was open, non-threatening, her 4 eyes found in the crowd. The colonists raised their guns, stepped forward, putting himself between the alien and his people once again. Stopped a few meters away. She studied the young human standing before her, blood on his face, wounds on his body, steel in his eyes. "You do not know us," she said. Her voice was gentle, her words carefully chosen. "But we have watched you. We came because of you." His grip tightened on his spear. "Why?" "Because we saw you stand when you should have fallen. You walked into a monster's den for your sister. You fought when there was no hope. You refused to surrender when any rational being would have run." She tilted her head. "We have watched 10,000 species across the galaxy. We have never seen anything like that. I did what anyone would do." Smiled. It was an awkward expression on her face, learned from weeks of watching humans, but it was genuine. "No," she said. "You did what humans do, and that is why we saved you tonight, because we want to understand, we want to learn." She knelt down, bringing herself to his eye level. "Tell me," she said, "why did you stay? Why did you fight? You must have known you could not win." Looked at her for a long moment. Behind him, his people were watching, was watching, was watching. Everyone he had ever known stood behind him, waiting to see what he would do. He looked at the alien. "Because they needed me too," he said simply. Nodded slowly. "That is what I thought you would say." She stood and addressed the crowd. "People of this colony, I am Lady of the Clan. We have watched you from afar for many years. Tonight we chose to intervene. We chose to save you." She paused. "Not because we gain anything from it, but because we saw something in you that we want to understand, something precious, something rare." She looked at. "Your kind calls it many things. Courage, love, sacrifice. We have no word for it in our language. Perhaps in time you can teach us one." She reached out her hand, a gesture she had learned from watching humans, an offer of peace. looked at her hand. He thought about everything that had happened. The cave, the creatures, his sister's screams and his mother's death, and all the long nights of fear and struggle and survival. He thought about what it meant to be human, to fight, to protect, to love without reason. He took her hand. "Then perhaps," said softly, "your kind is ready to stand among the stars." Behind them the sun was rising. The first light of dawn crept over the colony, turning the snow to gold. A new day was beginning. And with it, a new chapter in the history of humanity. They stayed, they talked, they learned. And in time they helped humanity build ships of their own, ships that would carry them to other worlds, other stars, other adventures. But that is another story. This story is about a boy who loved his sister. A boy who stood his ground. A boy who reminded the universe that there is nothing more dangerous than a human with something to protect. His name was, and he was just the beginning.